Hi, I am Tiffany Vance Huffman, and I am here with my dear friend, Will Shelton. And the only reason we are doing this is just to have a conversation. I enjoy having intelligent conversations with open-minded, curiously minded people, especially if they have a different perspective than me. And you and I have had many awesome conversations off and on over the years. And so I thought it would be fun to record it just so other people could listen. Not that I think my conversations are important, but it's just interesting. And so I also thought, wow, it would be so interesting to do this with you to start out with. And I thought we would talk about anything that's at the crossroads of science and religion. And specifically, my approach is, actually, I thought we'd call this one A Christian and a Mystic Walk into a Bar.
I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
Guess who's who?
I'm only having water though.
I'm having tea, so we're good.
Okay.
Okay. So how do I know you? You were my high school biology teacher. I met you when I was 14 years old. And I have known you and your family ever since. And you left teaching biology and you went into administration and to a few different other schools and as principal, vice principal, and now you are retired?
Yes. Yay.
Wonderful. Yay, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So, as I explained to you before, I thought that we would just start out. This is totally unscripted for anyone who's listening.
Yes.
Yeah. Organic conversations are way better. I don't want to have to be thinking ahead of time.
Agreed.
Good. So I thought that we would start by me explaining the neuroscience of what led me to leave Christianity and organized religion in general. Good?
Good. I do want to give a shout out in case anybody watches this who is from our old stomping ground of Laverne High School. Hello, everybody. I miss you, and hopefully we'll have some kind of reunion at some point, and we'll get together and laugh about old times.
At your new place out in the middle of nowhere?
We can do that. We can do that. Out in the bush. Well, I would
in the bush.
We're in Beach Grove. It's not that far down the interstate.
It is pretty out there, though.
That's why we like it.
Good. Well, you're short on time, so I want to be respectful of that. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Nope.
Okay.
I love you dearly, and I look forward to this conversation.
Perfect. Okay. Samesies. Okay. That's only funny because I don't talk like that. Okay, so there were actually two different studies. There was a book I read. It's this one, actually. It's called Buyology, B-U-Y-ology. Mm-hmm. It's truth and lies about why we buy. I don't think this book was meant to be life-changing, but it was for me. So in there, I read about two huge studies. One involved smokers all around the world. They conducted studies on people who smoke globally, and they had them hooked up to fMRIs, so functional magnetic resonance imaging, which means in an fMRI, they can determine in about 3 seconds where a thought is coming from. So it's like a 3-second delay. So where, like structurally in the brain, something is coming from. So in the first study, the smokers were all asked a number of questions. And one of the key questions was, whenever you see warnings on the side of cigarette packages that say, this causes cancer, it could cause pregnancy issues, and so on and so on. when you see that, the question was, does it make you smoke less? Keep in mind that in other countries, they are allowed to use imagery on the sides of their packaging. So they will often show open lungs that are black, or, you know, different areas of the body that have been profoundly affected by the cigarette smoke. So the question again was, when you see this imagery, when you see these words, does it make you smoke less? And pretty much everybody across the board, all over the world, is like, yep, definitely. I smoke less, you know, blah, blah, blah. But what the fMRI showed was something very different. It showed whenever they would look at an image on the side of the packaging, or just the words with the warning, it actually registered in the part of the brain that triggers cravings. So it's kind of like, don't think about elephants, and you have to think about elephants. It's the brain is just has to do what you say don't do.
Right.
So so that part sort of that gave me pause when I first read about that, because I thought, well, that seems a little unfair in terms of, you know, quote unquote sin. If this is how, like, why would you make me this way if that was the case? But I moved on, I kept going, and I came across another study in this same book. And I that was the last one for me. In this particular study, they were looking, they actually set up groups of people they were playing poker. And they had one group in another room who was watching the poker players. They could see everything that they were doing. And let's see, how did this break down? If they, in the room when they were watching the people play, if they saw that someone was cheating, they could press a button or whatever, and it would give the person a little shock. But they were also able to press the button when there was no cheating. And at that point, let's see, how did this? They discovered through this process, through same thing, fMRI, that first of all, the people, when they were administering the shock without any cheating involved, it actually registered in the part of the brain that like gave joy. It was this weird thing. There was something about making someone suffer that it just registers mentally as something, some kind of joy. It was really odd and unexpected.
You don't have some kind of electrode hooked to my chair here, do you, with a button in your home?
I do. Wait for it. When you least expect it.
Yes.
Oh, or like a fart machine. That would have been way better.
Thank you, Tiff.
You're welcome. All right, so yeah, so it registered as joyful, and that was really odd to me. When they did, however, shock them for cheating, it registered in the part of the brain where you would expect for something related to justice. This is some sort of retribution, some sort of something to balance out the scales. You cheated, you pay a price. With both of those studies in particular, I got to a point where I thought, my brain is made this way. It's made to do all the things that I'm not supposed to do, allegedly. And for me, that felt like, if I built a computer to perform all of these functions, and then when it performs all of those functions, I take a baseball bat to it because it performed its functions. And I couldn't deal with that. So let me just stop there and see if you have any thoughts, feedback, or question.
Why do you make a connection of being beaten with the baseball bat with organized religion?
maybe it's less organized religion and the concept of the way God was laid out to me all my life.
Okay,
Whether,
so talk about that for a minute.
yeah, so I grew up Jehovah's Witness. And then when I left that in my early, I was like 20, 21, 22, I left. And that's a whole other story. Lost all my friends and family for the most part. And then because that's what happens when you leave a cult like that. Then I ended up, I got pregnant with my daughter. And by the time she was about 6 months old, I thought, well, I felt like I needed to teach her something and I didn't know what. And I became a Christian and was in a Baptist church, but I never felt Baptist.
Mhm.
And then not long after that, I discovered Reformed theology, which was very much appealed to my intellect. It was, there's 5-point Calvinism, and it's just all laid out very definitively. And in all of these representations of God, whether it was through the very restrictive cult-like environment that I was in, or even in the less in the Baptist church, but definitely through Reformed theology, the message to me, I had two messages. One was that I felt like God was out to get me. That was the impression that I had been given of him.
Mhm.
The other impression, I think I just forgot.
That's okay.
I'll come back to it.
You've been around me too long.
Fart machine.
Fart machine, yes.
The other impression that I pulled from Reformed theology was this life is miserable. It's never going to get any better this side of heaven. So just suck it up and deal with it. And when I had asked, I had mentioned that to my pastor at the time, and he was mortified. He was like, why would you think that was my message? You know me. And I'm like, it seems like that week after week. And I hear it from other people too. And it's not just in that church. It was just Reformed theology in general. So to answer your question, I think I was given a very strict, rigid view of God. And I didn't want anything to do with it after that.
Mhm. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Many are in that boat. So it's my perception that God is not the one carrying around the baseball bat beating us over the head with it. I find that that's humans doing that to themselves, that we commit offenses, we don't do things we should, and then we are burdened with guilt and shame for having done something or for having not done something. And it's human nature, I think, to walk around beating ourselves over the head, putting ourselves down, separating ourselves from God. And I don't think that's what God's about at all. I think God is in the healing business. You and I have had this same conversation about a year ago. I remember making that statement to you that God is in the healing business, that that God is not out to destroy us. He's searching for connection. That there's a scripture in the New Testament where it talks about Jesus knocking at the door, and all we need to do is open the door and invite him in to dine with us and create communion and connection, a friendship, a kindredship with him. So it's my perception that if we do that fully, which I don't think we can ever fully experience that until we reach the life after, but if we do that as fully as we can and rid ourselves of all this baggage that we carry around, then we find joy. That you can find joy in any circumstance, really any circumstance, if you have that connection. It's like what was it, World War II? It was some, I don't recall, but the story goes that this man was a prisoner of war, and his job was to clean out the latrine every day. He had to go to the filthiest of the filthy, to clean that area out. But he would sing a hymn. I go to the garden alone, and he walks with me and he talks with me. I don't remember how all that hymn goes, but he would sing that to himself as he was doing that task. And in doing so, he found joy. I mean, I don't know how you find joy in that situation, but he found joy from his connection to God through singing that hymn aloud to himself as he performed that task. So first of all, for people who don't know me, I'm not a theologian whatsoever. I know you're shocked. I'm not
This
a
is a
theologian.
wasted call.
And people find it interesting that being a biology teacher, many have the impression that if you're a biology teacher, you're automatically an evolutionist. And if you're an evolutionist, then how in the world do you believe in God? And so anyway, I asked my dad one time. My dad was a general surgeon, for those who are inquiring. He was a general surgeon, and he was a quiet guy. But I asked him one day when I was about 12 years old, I said, how do we know this whole God thing is real? And he said to me, he said, Will, if you ever take a class in college called embryology, you'll understand.
Ah, that's beautiful, actually. What a great response.
I thought it was wacko. I was like, what kind of answer is that, Dad? I don't even know what that is at age 12. What are we talking about? And it just so happened that I grew up and became a biology major. And my last course that I took as an undergraduate was one summer. I took embryology. It was the only class I was taking. And I spent hours in an embryology lab studying the development of chick embryos from one stage to another through their development. And the specialization of cells that goes on in a developing embryo just fascinated me. That some cells migrate over here and become parts of the eye, and other cells migrate this way and they become part of another tissue or another organ. And I just thought to myself, this can't happen by circumstance. Something, and the way my mind works, there has to be an organizer. And to me, that I thought at that point, his answer that I had remembered all those years, wondering what in the world he was talking about, to me at that time, it made perfect sense. That all this can't just happen on its own. Something has to be in charge of creating this. So in some ways, that's the foundation of my belief, was that conversation with my dad, and years later taking that course. All that's a sidebar to what we were talking about.
It's a great one. No, it's totally applicable.
Well, I have just come to find in my life that I have carried a lot of baggage around from things that I have done, which were just downright stupid and uncalled for. It's kind of like when I became an assistant principal. Somebody came into my office my first week on the job and said, here's what your job is going to be like. You're going to show up every day at work with this invisible bag that you're carrying. And a teacher is going to stop you and say, Mr. Shelton, I need to report to you that so-and-so did such and such. And they're going to drop an invisible rock in your invisible bag. And they're going to walk away having relieved themselves of this weight because they've reported it to the person appointed to receive such information. But now you're carrying their rock around, and you're going to turn the corner, and here's a student, Mr. Shelton, I need your help with whatever. And they're going to drop a rock in your bag. And so by the end of the day, you have all these people around you who are free of their stones. They're free of their burdens, but now you're carrying them all. Mm-hmm. And I think life weighs us down with baggage that we need to get rid of. And in my view, that's what Christ was all about. Christ accepted our baggage on the cross, and we don't have to deal with it anymore. That through faith in him being the Son of a living God, we are free, and we don't have to beat ourselves up with baseball bats anymore. That we can accept his grace and his mercy and his forgiveness for all of our shortcomings. And for me, there are many. But if we make our mind up, we can be rid of all that. I just wrote a chapter on that for my book, by the way. I just completed that chapter.
Oh, very good. So you're wordy about it.
I'm sorry?
Wordy, not word. That's terrible. I was like, you have plenty of things to say. By all means, keep going.
Yes, keep going, keep going. Anyway.
No, thank you for sharing that. It reminds me that I need to probably specify a couple of things. One is,
Mhm.
I've explained this to you before, I don't really hold beliefs.
Mhm.
I just hold possibilities. Many of them. Some are more plausible to me than others, but I don't cling to any of them. The other thing I should stipulate is I just said I don't have beliefs. There's one belief I do hold. I don't believe in sin, at least in the way that it is described through the modern church. That said, the last time we had a good long conversation outside of this environment was actually, I think, at the Green Dragon in Murfreesboro, that Hobbit bar that was so fun was now closed.
Yeah, sad.
Yeah. While we were there, whatever I said, it led you to ask me if I'd read The Shack. And I haven't forgotten about it. I've kind of had it on my list for forever. Excuse me, but my list is lengthy. And I was just wanting to honor your request that I at least looked into it. I didn't read it. However, but I thought about it.
Thank you for honoring my request. But you
I
thought
like
about
that.
it.
I did.
You thought about it.
Here's what
Okay.
I did do. It just came out on Netflix. And I knew we were going to be having our conversation. I was like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and watch it. So I did. And I must say, I really appreciated so much about this movie. Excuse me. The only thing I didn't appreciate about it was a very distinct evangelical call. But all the rest of it, I did appreciate. Not that it like offended me or anything, it's just not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
What I really loved was the way that the feminine is presented through these images of God.
Mm-hmm.
So this man is going through this thing, and you might want to summarize it. I'm going off a movie that I watched from a few weeks ago, and I was sort of tired.
Basically, this man suffers a crisis in his life, a major crisis, the loss of a child in a brutal fashion, and he's cast into a world of uncertainty and questions his faith and his beliefs and why things happen the way they do and how could this possibly be allowed to happen to my child, and finds himself in a very unique environment where he comes face to face, as it's portrayed, he comes face to face with God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. And through his interactions with them, he comes to find peace with himself and with God. So is that a little nutshell to put on it?
That's good. So I don't know about the book, excuse me, but in the movie, those parts of God come to him in both male and female form.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I really, really appreciated that because a number of reasons, but probably most intimate to me would be that since after all of my experiences through religion and then stepping away from it, but also through studying the Bible and everything I could get my hands on, I just really appreciated, no, that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say was my experience has been my encounter with what I really don't like the word God, only because it's just, it has baggage. It has so much baggage with it. I
Mhm.
know people often refer to it as source, or I don't know any of the other buzzwords. I don't like any of
Supreme
them.
being.
Yeah, it's just that they feel so limiting to me. And
Mhm.
in my experience of encountering with the divine was inexplicable. It was nothing that can be defined. And I told you the last time that we met, I think at Green Dragon back then, that then I said, I don't know if God is a he, she, or an it, and I don't think it matters. I'm going back to it because it's most inclusive. I can see God the Father, God the Mother, and various manifestations of God, but I definitely, I think me and many people, especially women, perhaps even men as well, really struggle with God as Father, because there has been so much discipline and punishment tied into religion with God as Father. And people have often such very difficult relationships with their fathers.
Mhm.
So I know it's not just me, but I really struggled with that. That was not something that I wanted anything to do with. Now I'm in a bit of a different place. I'm still going back to, I can't define it. I can't label it. And I don't like the word God because of the baggage, but I understand why people use it.
Mhm.
I don't know if that, is that
Yeah.
concrete?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, God referred to himself, or if you want to say to itself in the Old Testament, as I am.
Mhm.
I am. So um, he is, or it is, whatever, whatever you want to say. To me, God is love. That's what God is all about, is love. He wants what's best for us, or it
You know,
won't,
I
whatever you
get
want
it.
to say.
Whatever you want to, yeah, I get
I
it.
was raised with he, so that's what
I was too.
but love is not restricted to one gender. Love is love, you know? Um, so I don't get terribly hung up on that. Well, maybe I do, because when I write or when I discuss, I always say him, his, he, whatever. Um, that's the way I was raised,
It's normal.
and the version of the Bible I read is stated that way. But love is all encompassing. So I think when people talk about religion, we start nitpicking little tiny things that distract us. You mentioned sin a while ago, that you don't believe in sin. To me, sin is just missing the mark. So I miss the mark thousands of times a day. I pass someone that maybe needed some help. I shrug off someone who's trying to be nice. It could be 1,000 different things. Today, I cut somebody off in traffic unintentionally, but I did, and he wasn't happy, and I'm sorry. I use the whole hand, not just one finger.
Sure, sure.
Sorry. Um, but it's just missing the mark, and that's what humans do. We miss the mark. Um, so I don't know how I went down that rabbit hole, but anyway,
No,
I
no,
don't
I'm
remember
glad.
what I was saying. But
It's
love.
fine.
To me, love
Yeah.
conquers all of that. It takes away worrying about every little mistake we make, because we're going to make them every day.
On, I don't have anything to add to that specifically, but
Okay.
I did want to say something about the shack that I was just like, yes, thank you. So when we talk about the feminine and the masculine, as I've told you before, when I talk about this, I'm not referring to expressions of gender or sexuality. I'm referring to universal forces of nature, the masculine and the feminine. In Eastern philosophy, it's often referred to as yin and yang. There are many ways of looking at this, but I just want to look at it from the perspective of feminine and masculine first, in clarifying that there isn't one without the other. One is meaningless by itself. They're both part of a whole. And we in the West especially have taken the feminine, and we often look down on the feminine. Often falls in the categories of things that we look down on with shame. We don't like those things, and maybe I can save that for a different time, but for this particular conversation, one of the things associated with the feminine is chaos, whereas order is associated with the masculine. So again, one is meaningless without the other. They're both parts of a whole. What I really liked about a particular scene in The Shack, the movie, was when I guess he first arrived, and this woman, a manifestation of God, takes him into her garden, and he comments about the garden, looking around, saying, I mean, he thought it was beautiful, I believe, but he was like, it's just so chaotic. She's like, yeah, I like to put things wherever they need to go. So up close, it looks like chaos. But when the camera pulls back, the garden is basically in the shape of a fractal. I love that. I loved it because the chaos is associated with the feminine. It is disorder. It is all the things that we do not like in the West, because in Western philosophy, the Western mindset it's very defined. We have very rigid rules on what's real and what isn't real. It has to be measurable for us. Otherwise, it's not considered real. So if you can't see it, taste it, smell it, touch it, or hear it, according to Western science, it doesn't exist. How does that relate to chaos? I don't know in this moment, but that's the point. Chaos is simply a different kind of order. Chaos enters the picture when things are too stagnant, too out of balance. Chaos comes in and completely throws everything, like a tornado, or a hurricane, all over the place, and things get reordered. And so when I look at the current state of the planet in general, both in terms of what's happening ecologically, environmentally, but also in terms of what happens with us as people, as societies and communities or whatever, it's chaotic. It's very, very chaotic right now. We have, I assume, parts of the world are still burning because that's been forever to get under control. The ice is melting, people are dying, people are being relocated. And then there's all the political upheaval on the edge of, another world war, yada, yada, yada. I see this as chaos, as the feminine coming in and shaking stuff up and developing a new kind of order. I don't see the chaos as bad. I don't see it as good. I'm just watching it and sort of just seeing it for what it is, which for me is definitively feminine. Again, not related. I'm not talking about men, women.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I think
but
it's
just the
interesting.
feminine. Yeah.
I think it's interesting the way you viewed that whole scene, because I tend to personalize everything. I see things and think, how does that relate to me? So with that example you just gave of the chaos in the garden, and this looks like a mess and whatever, I would relate that to myself or any human being, that there are parts of us at any given time that are an absolute mess. You know, we're a mess in some aspect of our lives, but when you pull back and you see our whole self, there's beauty there. Or at least there's a chance for beauty, right? There's something within us that can be meaningful and purposeful and beneficial to others, or to, that
Yeah.
that's the way I would view that. So that was interesting.
Yeah. I like that analogy. It's like, yeah, it's an analog because it's just a reflection
Mhm.
of, well, there's that phrase, as above, so below, which is referring to the cosmos in general, that whatever happens in the cosmos also happens in here. It also
Mhm.
happens down here on Earth.
Mhm.
So when I am a mess and then I stabilize, then yes, there's been some healing that has happened. You would hope, you would think that there's some healing, some transformation that has happened in that chaos. But in the chaos, you look like a disaster. Your life is falling apart or
Mhm.
whatever. But then
Mhm.
when you pull back and look at it from the big picture perspective, it's a very, very different. It's just been reordered. And
Mhm.
I think that's beautiful and amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think as human beings, we constantly need to be reordered. We need to be refocused and recentered, um, on some purpose. So I just read John Maxwell's book, Intentional Living, which I think is fabulous. I would recommend it to anyone. And he clearly states in the early part of the book that he is a Christian, but he's not writing this necessarily from a Christian perspective. And at some points in the book, he'll say, "Okay, now I'm about to chase a little portion of Christianity in these next couple of pages. So if you want to skip this part, go to page whatever."
Nice.
But
That's a
but
guy who knows his audience.
yes, that's right. Yes, or plural of that, audiences, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's all about that we, whether you're a Christian or not, surely we have some purpose in this life. Surely we can realize that we have something to offer. And in order to do that fully, we have to be intentional about it. We have to wake up every morning and say, okay, what am I going to do to make a positive difference? And not only myself, but in those around me and in the world around me. I think it's a great book, but
Interesting.
but that's all about reordering and restructuring and being intentional about it.
Yeah. There's also something to be said, and this is part of the feminine, about going with the flow. Feminine is flow, like water. Think about water, whereas the masculine is rigid and defined. So it's the difference in a creek and like a lock that's built,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Actually, I'm sorry, I don't know what you said that triggered that thought in me, but you were talking about, well, it doesn't matter. I think maybe that's what I'm getting at, is that's where that's my purpose. I know my purpose.
What is your purpose?
My purpose, I am here to help facilitate the return of the feminine. And that sounds really broad and vague, but it's okay. Let me just sort of summarize something, my perspective that I've shared with you before, and I'll put it here again. We know that everything is in a cycle. My body has a cycle, the seasons have a cycle, the dirt has cycles. weather, everything. There are cycles with the sun and everything in our solar system. And there are cycles that continue going all the way out into the universe. The universe is cyclical. In the year 2012 is a good example. That was the year that people misunderstood the Mayan calendar as saying that it was the end of the world. It was not the end of the world. It was the end of an age. There are other traditions along the same lines that refer to this being the end of an age, and now we're moving into a different age. It's just another cycle. And depending on what tradition you're looking at, or even what science you're looking at, those cycles can be like 68,000 years or 30,000. It just depends on which tradition. In this particular age that we are apparently entering into, it's about the return of the feminine. And what I mean by that is that for the last however long this age has continued, it's been a masculine dominant age. And what I mean by that is that the structure, the rigid structure, has been the dominating force. And it's not just rigid structure, it's all the things that come with the masculine, which I actually have a PowerPoint slide that I created, not for this, but for another thing that I'm doing. And I list all the different ways to compare and contrast the masculine and feminine. So I wish that those were more readily available in my brain at this moment, but I'm not talking about like something, a new age concept. I'm talking about something, this is ancient, that we go through different ages in the universe. And right now, as I understand it, we are entering into this new age where the feminine will bring in the balance, because we have been so out of balance. Being so out of balance is indicated by the current state of ourselves and the planet in general. The masculine leans towards destruction, whereas the feminine leans towards creation. Neither is good or bad. It's just that when one is out of balance, then we have a problem. So the destructive, and there's a destructive side of feminine and a creative side of masculine, but the destructive masculine side has been so dominating through wars and what it's done to people, land, and animals. We have utterly subjugated them. You can learn a lot about a country by the way they treat their women, their children, their animals, their land. And what we have done over the last few thousand years, several thousand years, especially as we've gotten closer and up through the industrial age and to the present now, where we just take and take and take and take and take and take and take from the planet with no reciprocity. We're not putting things back. We're not restoring soil. We're not restoring trees. We're just taking and we're taking and we're taking, to the point where we now have environmental chaos, ecological chaos, mental, physical chaos for everybody on the planet, because this stuff comes out in us. I don't know where I was going with that.
That's okay. Are you familiar with the children's book, The Giving Tree?
Yes, yes, love it.
Yeah, that summarizes everything you just said.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It's human nature to be selfish. It's human nature to want more. When is enough? You know? I mean, you have multi-billionaires.
Yeah, of course.
But they want more. Or we have most everybody in this country is in the top 2 or 3% socioeconomically compared to the rest of the world.
Oh, comparatively.
but we always want more. It's true in relationships that, okay, you supply these things for me in this relationship, but I want you to do this. I want you to supply this or that. It is a sad commentary on humanity, but that is the way we are, and that's beautifully portrayed in a very simple book called The Giving Tree. If whoever's watching this, if you have not read that, you need to read it no matter your age, because it speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. It's a great book.
I tried to read that to my year and a half, year and 8 month old granddaughter the other day, but she's totally consumed on one book in this house.
Which is?
It's 20 something and one cat. On every page you have to find the cat.
So it's a Where's Waldo?
I'm so sick of finding that cat. It's every minute. I said, don't you want to read that? No, Pap. I want to read,
Yeah.
But
Kids.
Speaking
of selfish.
Oh, yeah. We've all been.
I have to say, I don't know that I agree that it's human nature to be selfish. And I don't know. I'm leaning towards not agreeing with it, simply because I've studied so many other cultures, both past and present, where that's just not their mode. That's not the way that they navigate life. My perception is that the masculine is very individual. The feminine is very collective. It's communal. And I feel like that's more part of the masculine dominant part, especially in the Western societies. And just in case I'm not clear, when I say Western society, really you could say any place that's affected by capitalism, but it's Western philosophy comes down largely from the ancient Greeks, and it forms a lot of the basis of Western governments, and our education system and so forth. And science, it governs science, which that's a whole other conversation, which we should definitely have. And I think you're running out of time about that, because in the science is so masculine is micro, feminine is macro. So we got little picture, big picture. And you can see that the masculine dominates the sciences in general, because we go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and get as microscopic and subatomic as we can, which is not a bad thing. It's just, so defined.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like looking at the garden in the book up close, or in the movie up close.
Exactly.
You got to pull back sometimes and see the big picture.
Yeah. And so I guess that's where I am. I sort of toggle back and forth between the micro and the macro. Mm-hmm. And when I'm looking at the micro, I can see, well, this isn't how I would do it, or it's not my favorite, but it is what it is. But when I pull back at the macro level and look at the big picture, I realize whether it's my cup of tea or not doesn't matter. It's part of this thing that has to happen. Yeah. This goes back to what I was probably getting at with the cosmic or universal cycles, and also what I said about not believing in sin per se, in the way that it's directed or addressed biblically, at least in current religious interpretations, and worse in the past several hundred years. For me, it's not a sin, it's consequence. That is the basic definition of the word karma. It's just a consequence. It's simple Newtonian physics, that for every action there's an equal or opposite reaction. And that's how the universe works. Like the universe doesn't work in terms of right or wrong, black or white, good or bad. It just works in terms of consequence. That's how our existence works, is consequence.
Mhm.
So when I'm looking at all the chaos that's happening all around us, I see it as consequence. And it just is. It has to be this way. We may hate it and be miserable, and we may die, and we may lose people. It's just consequence carried from millennia and recently to the present. And this is what it looks like. And it just is. And I know that sounds weird, because we're supposed to have really strong opinions about these things. I'm supposed to have a really strong opinion about the environment and about political upheaval. I don't anymore. I let that stuff go, because they were just little judgments that I was making about everything. And I learned that every judgment I was making was like putting on a clouded lens over my vision, to where it prevents me from seeing it for what it really is. Not that I have the answers. It's just that now I'm at a place where I can look at the micro, I can look at things up close, and I can back up and be like, all right, this is tough, but it's got to be this way. It just is. And it's not that I'm apathetic. I'm just watching it. I'm just observing it, to just see what it is without the emotional attachments or anything like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
And it's hard not to have the emotional attachments, because we're all a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're just a tiny piece in a great big moving organism, so to speak, that progresses as we go through time. So yeah, it's hard to do that.
Are you okay, we have to come back to this. Are you want to do this again? I do. Because I know you have to go soon.
I'm just along for the ride. Yeah, I've got to go. We're renovating some barn space into 2 Airbnb suites, and I need to get out of here and help this guy. But
Okay.
yes, we can do it again.
Yeah, we have
When I said that it's a human condition to be selfish, I guess my evidence of that would be, if you put a group of toddlers in a room piled full of toys, some sharing may be evident on its own. But I would dare say most of the time those kids are going to be grabbing every toy they can. You know what I mean?
I do.
We always want more. It doesn't matter if you have a whole lap full of toys. I want that toy that you're playing with. That's my toy. You know, and you end up with this constant struggle, all based on selfishness, where we just need to let go and realize that enough is enough. You know?
So I think my point that I was trying to state earlier was, thank you for using this example. So let's say that you took this same group of, or not the same group, let's say we took a group of Native American toddlers who have grown up in a nature-based environment, like their worldview is nature-based. Would they respond the same way as the group of toddlers from the West?
I don't know.
That's my point. That's why I'm saying I don't know that it's a universal thing.
Okay, so what we're going to do, you and I, we're going to fly to some remote region. Okay? We'll take the spouses. Okay? But we're going to fly to some remote region, and we're going to do a study on kids. We'll let the spouses conduct a study on the kids while we find a nice beach to recline on.
Yeah, let them work. It's their job.
It's their job. Yeah, we're paying their way after all.
That's right.
So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
See, that's what I was trying to say about, I've studied so many different cultures. It's just really hard for me at this point to say that much of anything is human nature, because it's just, we assume that they are, and yet there are plenty of places where that's not the situation. So 1 minute. Can I give you 1 minute? I just tell you.
1 minute,
Okay.
a 1
there's
minute wrap.
Okay.
Put a bow on it.
Just there's a very good example of this. There's a famous study conducted by well-known anthropologist named Margaret Mead. Years ago, I guess around the turn of the last century, somewhere around there. She went to New Guinea because New Guinea has all the cool, weird stuff. And she went to New Guinea and she studied 3 different tribes. She was looking at gender and the way that they do gender. And so in one tribe, it was very, very masculine. The men were hunters and they were gone and they did their thing and they were very aggressive. And the women were the gatherers and they were the caretakers of the children and the cooks and all the things that you would expect from women's work, whatever. Then there was another tribe that she studied that was the exact opposite. The women were the hunters. The women were very aggressive and the men would stay home and take care of the kids. And they would even sit around and play with each other's hair and gossip just the way that we assume women do here.
Yeah, they do.
And they do. And then the third group was totally egalitarian. Everybody was equal across the board. There was no superiority or inferiority. It was just everybody shared the weight. And my point there is, and that took 2 minutes, I'm sorry. My point there is we assume human nature. We assume this is the way things are supposed to be, but we don't really have, it's not based on, I don't know if it's based on facts. That's my point. So I just don't like to make assumptions about that kind of thing anymore.
I think all we can base things on are our own experiences,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And
So-
ours is Western.
So for example, yeah, I'm obviously a Western civilization kind of guy. Jenny and I are sitting here on 21 acres. Our neighbors over here who have this hillside that runs up behind us have 6 acres right there that is absolutely gorgeous. And I've told Jenny, boy, I would love to secure those 6 acres at some point. You know, if they ever move, if they ever decide to sell, I want to try to get those 6 acres. Do I really need? Do I really need
more?
Why do I need 6 more acres? I mean, but that's just the way we're brought up. That
Yes, that's the key.
that
The key.
there is never enough. So yes, I mean I'm as guilty of that as anybody.
We are trained to consume. That's the capitalist model. We have to consume relentlessly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it's based on. So yeah,
okay,
of course it infiltrates us.
So what is the bow you're going to put on this discussion?
Mm.
That's your job, you know.
Is it?
Yeah, you're the one who instigated this whole idea. So
Oh, I'm not really a bow person.
you're the package wrapper.
Oh, I don't know, but we can go. I don't know what the bow is, but I do want to come if you enjoyed this, if you're willing, I would love to do this again. And definitely would love to talk about the scientific dogma and compare it to religion, because to me, I don't poo-poo science, but it's also its own religion in a way. It even has its own 5-point Calvinist analog in the form of the developing a hypothesis, like you follow these very specific steps. And I would love to talk about that with you if you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
Or if that's a no, it's okay.
No, that's fine. I mean, science is very ordered. It's very structured. That's one of the things that appeals to me about biology. That is, it's all so structured. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a paramecium, which is a unicellular little organism swimming around in the water, or if you're talking about a blue whale. There's structure within that organism that allows it to function, and there's structure within the individual human that allows us to function in society, or structures in everything, including chemistry, which I despise. I despise chemistry. Whoever came up with that subject needs to be thumped in the head with a baseball bat.
Yes, wise.
So I had to take chemistry, you know, in high school and in college as part of my scientific explorations, I had to take chemistry. What is the point in forcing kids to balance chemical equations? What is the point? If you put the chemicals in the test tube, they're going to balance themselves. You know,
Interesting.
why do I need to know? I don't need to know that. So anyway, that's just a sidebar.
Well, we got to arm people with the ability to make meth. I don't know.
Great.
Science.
Science. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do this again. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. We'll talk again soon.
It's great to see you. It always is.
Same. I couldn't find the record button. Okay.
It's okay.